Welcome to True Echo, where the truth resonates louder than wealth, louder than prejudice, and louder than the lies we tell ourselves about who belongs and who doesn't. Today's story is not just jaw-dropping, it's a brutal reminder that the quietest woman in the room might just be the one with the loudest legacy. This is the true echo of justice, wrapped in silk and stitched with dignity. Stay with us. The heavy envelope had arrived on a quiet Monday morning, nestled between a stack of charity reports and a handwritten letter from an orphanage in Atlanta. Hannah Jackson paused with her tea still steaming beside her as she lifted the thick ivory stock, the weight of it far more ominous than elegant. She recognized the handwriting immediately, flourished and performative, as if each curve of the pen was meant to be admired. It was from Vanessa Crawford. Hannah hadn't thought about Vanessa in years. They'd graduated high school together, a lifetime ago it felt, but had never been close. Vanessa had been the queen bee, loud, luminous, always surrounded by the right people, always skating on the edge of cruelty and charm. Hannah had been the opposite, quiet, thoughtful, immersed in books, often mocked for wearing second-hand clothes and bringing lunch from home. She had no reason to believe that Vanessa remembered her fondly. And yet, here it was, an invitation to her wedding. The enclosed note was brief but oddly affectionate. "Dearest Hannah, it would mean the world to me to have you here on my big day. You simply must attend. Vanessa." Hannah stared at the card, her brow furrowing. Part of her wanted to toss it aside. But part of her, perhaps the part that still believed in grace and growth, whispered, "People change." Maybe Vanessa was reaching out from a place of kindness. Maybe this was about healing old rifts. So she went. What Hannah didn't know, what no part of her heart suspected, was that hundreds of miles away in a high-rise penthouse in Manhattan, Vanessa was laughing. "Do you remember Hannah Jackson?" Vanessa purred, swirling her wine glass as her friends crowded around. The setting was predictably excessive: white couches, skyline view, and a gold-plated guest list on her laptop. Ashley raised a perfectly arched brow. The scholarship girl? The one who always looked like she raided a thrift store. Vanessa grinned. The very one. Jessica, draped across a velvet armchair, clapped her hands. "Wait, are you serious? You invited her?" "Oh, not just invited," Vanessa replied, leaning back. "She's going to be the star of the show." There was a beat of silence before Brittany, the young cosmetics mogul with teeth too white to be real, whispered, "Vanessa, you're bad." Vanessa's smile didn't flicker. "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet." The Azure Hotel in Miami was sunlight, sea breeze, and sinfully expensive everything. Its marble floors gleamed. Its chandeliers sparkled. It was a temple built for the ultra-elite. And into that temple walked Hannah. She wore a light blue linen dress. Her dark curls were pinned back simply. Her heels were modest. And she knew, the moment she stepped inside that she looked wildly out of place. Everywhere around her shimmered with diamonds and decadence. Guests arrived in gowns that cost more than most families earned in a year. They floated on clouds of designer perfume, clutching champagne flutes and Cartier clutches. Hannah smiled politely at the servers. She nodded toward the reception table. And then she heard it, the first whisper. "Oh my God. She must have picked that up at a Goodwill. She's still living that poor girl life, huh?" Her heart tightened, but she kept walking. Then Vanessa appeared, luminous in a gown that glistened like ice and vengeance. She swept in with her entourage trailing behind, and when she saw Hannah, her eyes gleamed. "Hannah," she cried with saccharine sweetness. "You look just the same. So charmingly simple." Hannah, steady and gracious, replied, "I'm honored to be here, Vanessa. Congratulations." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Oh, trust me, you'll be unforgettable tonight." Hannah made her way through the ballroom, each step heavier than the last. She tried to focus on the flickering candles, the elegant floral centerpieces, the soft hum of a string quartet in the corner. But the laughter followed her, subtle at first, like a breeze through cracked windows, then louder, more deliberate. She reached the reception desk to check in, hoping for a brief moment of normalcy. But the young woman behind the counter, dressed in crisp hotel uniform and a tight bun, looked up and blinked. "Excuse me, ma'am," the woman said, her voice clipped. "The service entrance is around the side. If you're looking for a uniform change." Hannah's heart sank. "I'm a guest," she said softly, holding up the invitation. The gold foil shimmered under the chandelier light. The woman's expression faltered. She looked back at her tablet, then at Hannah, then again at the card. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Jackson. Please go right in." The apology was thin. The judgment remained. Behind her, whispers snowballed. "Did you hear that?" She thought she was staff. Oh, this is just getting better and better. And from across the room, Vanessa watched it all unfold like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of cruelty. Her smirk deepened as she turned to Ashley. Told you she'd blend in beautifully with the wait staff. Ashley giggled. God, this is like watching a reality show. But better because it's real. Vanessa took a sip of her champagne. Just wait until the photos go viral. Hannah made her way to the long banquet table, hoping the relative anonymity of seating might shield her from the worst of it. She sat quietly, folding her hands, doing everything in her power to remain composed. The hum of conversation around her was relentless. No one sat beside her. Then came the click of heels. Ashley, tall and angular, with cascading blonde hair and a crimson dress that could silence traffic, slid into the seat next to her. Her phone was already in her hand. Well, hey there, Ashley said, flashing an insincere smile. Didn't expect a guest to show up in linen. So brave of you. Hannah forced a polite nod. I'm here to support Vanessa. I didn't think my dress would be an issue. Ashley leaned in closer. Oh honey, it's not an issue. It's the entertainment. Behind her, Brittany and Jessica emerged like shadows. Brittany, the cosmetics queen with skin like porcelain and a voice like a blade, said, Honestly, Hannah, this is inspirational. You've really committed to the whole understated aesthetic. Jessica added with a wicked glint, Vintage is in, just not that vintage. Laughter erupted from the table. Hannah's cheeks burned, but she didn't move. Ashley lifted her phone and without warning, snapped a photo. Smile, sweetheart. You're about to be Insta-famous. She tapped her screen. Seconds later, Hannah's face, caught in a moment of discomfort, eyes a little too wide, was posted with the caption, When someone shows up to a millionaire's wedding dressed like she's headed to Sunday soup kitchen. Likes and laughing emojis poured in. Brittany followed up with her own shot, #wedding-cringe, #linen-legacy. Jessica live-streamed it. Say hello to tonight's surprise act, folks. More laughter. From the head of the room, Vanessa stepped forward. She tapped her champagne glass with the back of her ring. The hall fell quiet as hundreds of heads turned. She stood under the spotlight, radiant and ruthless. I just wanted to take a moment, she began, her voice sweet, to acknowledge how special it is when old friends show up to celebrate. Pause. Even if they show up looking like, well, she trailed off with a smile. Polite chuckles. Then bolder laughter. Vanessa turned her eyes toward Hannah. But truly I'm touched. You really went out of your way to be here. Hannah stood, heart pounding. I'm happy to support you, she said clearly. Vanessa's smile didn't falter. And we're thrilled to have you, though I do wonder, how many thrift stores did it take to pull that look together? The crowd gasped. Laughter exploded. Someone even clapped. Hannah blinked, stunned. Before she could respond, Vanessa gestured to the security staff standing at the sides of the ballroom. For the comfort of our guests, she said in mock sorrow, I think it might be best if Miss Jackson stepped out for a bit. The security guards hesitated. But Vanessa's gaze was ice. Reluctantly they stepped toward Hannah. She stood still as if rooted to the floor by the weight of every insult, every smirk, every photo. Her heart felt cracked wide open, but she would not cry. Not here. I'm not causing a scene, she whispered to the guards, her voice trembling but clear. But I'm also not going to apologize for showing up as myself. Marcus, one of the guards, a black man with gentle eyes, looked at her with quiet sympathy. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's just orders. Hannah nodded once and walked toward the exit. And then the real humiliation began. The grand ballroom hushed as Hannah neared the towering doors, her figure small and solitary against the backdrop of extravagance. Her linen dress, now rumpled from tension and the press of so many eyes, fluttered as the cold air from outside swept in. She walked slowly, silently, with Marcus and Ryan flanking her like reluctant shadows. The laughter had died down, but the weight of silence was far worse. It wasn't just the whispers, it was the fact that no one had stepped in. Not a single person had spoken up. She could feel it, the searing sting of judgment, not just for her outfit but for her very presence. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, a voice rang out from behind. Oh wait. Jessica called out, her heels clicking as she approached with a wine glass in hand. Let's not let her leave so tense. Here, a little something to help her relax. Before anyone could react, Jessica, accidentally, stumbled forward and spilled the entire glass of red wine down the front of Hannah's dress. The dark stain spread like wildfire over the soft blue fabric. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jessica clutched her chest in exaggerated horror. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said with mock contrition. "These heels are just impossible." The laughter returned, louder, sharper, crueler. And still Hannah said nothing. She just stood there, her hands trembling at her sides, the soaked fabric clinging to her skin like shame. Marcus handed her a napkin, eyes full of apology. "Ma'am?" But Hannah shook her head gently. "It's not your fault." She turned toward the doors, her vision blurring as tears threatened to fall. She'd made it just a few more steps before Vanessa's voice cut through the room again, sharper than ever. "Actually," Vanessa said, her voice raised for the crowd, "I've just received some troubling information." Everyone turned. Vanessa stood near the stage, one hand clutching her microphone, the other gesturing dramatically toward Hannah. "It appears Miss Jackson may have brought an unregistered item to this event. For safety reasons, we'll need to inspect the gift she brought." A murmur of confusion and suspicion swept through the guests. Vanessa gave the guards a pointed look. Marcus hesitated but stepped forward. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I need to check your package." Hannah stared at him, horrified. "It's just a blanket," she said quietly. "I made it myself." Marcus took it gently from her arms and unwrapped it. Inside was a delicately embroidered pastel blanket, handmade with care, each stitch bearing quiet love. Vanessa laughed. "Oh, how touching. A homemade gift. How provincial." Jessica, already filming again, panned her phone over the blanket. "A wedding gift fit for royalty," she said sarcastically. "The Queen of Etsy has arrived." The crowd exploded in laughter. And Hannah, face burning, could no longer hold back the tears. She turned away to hide them, her fingers still clinging to the edge of the stained fabric. The guards began guiding her once more to the exit. This time no one whispered. No one laughed. Because that's when the sound of engines shattered everything. From outside the ballroom, a low, commanding rumble began to grow. At first it was distant, like a storm rolling in over the sea. Then it grew louder, sharper, the unmistakable sound of an elite convoy pulling up to the hotel's private entrance. Guests turned toward the glass doors, their curiosity piqued. Cameras dropped. Phones shifted toward the windows. A sleek black Rolls-Royce eased to a stop beneath the covered awning. Then another. And another. The doors opened in perfect synchronization. From the first stepped a tall man in an impeccably tailored black suit. Everything about him radiated quiet authority. His shoulders broad, his gait measured, his presence so commanding that even the air around him seemed to shift. Guests gasped. "Is that Julian Carter? No way. Oh my God, he's not on the list." Julian Carter, billionaire industrialist, one of the most powerful private magnates in America, a man who hadn't been seen at a public event in nearly 2 years, was walking calmly into Vanessa Crawford's wedding. And his eyes? They were locked on Hannah. Hannah stood frozen at the threshold of the ballroom, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. Her stained dress clung to her body like a scarlet letter. Her eyes brimmed with tears. But as Julian stepped into the ballroom, everything changed. The room fell utterly silent. Even Vanessa's breath caught. Julian walked past the stunned crowd, not sparing a glance at a single soul until he reached Hannah. When he did, his expression shifted from steel to warmth. He reached out, took her hand, and said in a voice so low and deep it felt like the ground trembled beneath him, "Hannah, I'm sorry I'm late." Hannah's breath hitched. "Julian?" He looked down at her, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, lips trembling. Julian turned to face the crowd, his voice rising to fill the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone calm but laced with power, "I think there's something you all need to know." He paused, letting the silence hang thick in the air. "This woman you've mocked, insulted, humiliated tonight, is my wife." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Julian didn't flinch. "She's not only my partner in life. She is also the co-owner of Carter Enterprises. She holds half of everything I've ever built. And she's the reason I stand where I do today." His words struck the room like lightning. Faces turned pale. Phones dropped. Vanessa staggered, her lips moving silently, as if trying to summon a defense that wouldn't come. And Hannah, who had entered the room in linen and left it in shame, stood tall again, her hand wrapped in her husband's, her soul slowly mending under the sheer force of his truth. Julian wasn't finished. "I am ashamed of what I've seen tonight. You have all shown me what real poverty looks like, not in wealth but in heart." He turned his icy gaze to Vanessa, Jessica, Ashley, and Brittany. "And it's time someone paid the price. For a long moment no one moved. The tension in the grand ballroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every eye was either locked on Julian Carter or turned away in shame. The only sound was the quiet hum of the chandeliers above, and the distant echo of the ocean beyond the windows. Vanessa stood motionless near the stage, frozen like a statue carved out of panic. Her proud smile was gone, replaced by the tight-lipped expression of someone watching the empire they built collapse brick by brick. Julian turned fully toward her now, releasing Hannah's hand only to point, calmly, unmistakably, in her direction. "Vanessa Crawford," he said, his voice low but cutting. "You didn't just insult my wife tonight. You orchestrated an entire campaign to humiliate her publicly, in front of your guests, on what was supposed to be your happiest day. What? Because she dared to walk into this room without flaunting wealth like armor?" Vanessa flinched. Her throat bobbed. "Julian, this is all a—" "Don't," he interrupted, raising one hand. "Don't lie. Not tonight." He turned slightly and motioned to someone near the ballroom doors. From the shadows emerged a woman in a sleek black pantsuit, tablet in hand, her stride confident and precise. She moved to Julian's side and handed him the device without a word. "This," Julian said, holding the tablet high, "contains screenshots of private chat messages between Vanessa, Jessica, Brittany, and Ashley, planning every insult, every accidental photo, and even that appalling wine stunt." The screen lit up as he swiped across it, revealing line after line of damning texts. "Let's make her the joke of the night. She thinks she belongs here, how adorable. Can someone spill something on her? Preferably red. Drama always plays better with a splash." The crowd gasped. Brittany's face went white. Jessica took a step back. Ashley looked like she might faint. Vanessa, lips trembling, tried again. It was supposed to be a joke, harmless. Julian's voice snapped like a whip. "Cruelty isn't harmless. And racism is never a joke." Gasps again. Whispers flared. Someone near the back began live streaming, whispering into their phone. "This is happening. Right now. Julian Carter just exposed everything." Julian stepped closer to the stage, now towering just feet from Vanessa. "You invited my wife under the false pretense of friendship," he continued. "You used her as entertainment, a social punching bag, because you thought she was beneath you." Then he dropped the final blow. "But here's the truth. My wife, Hannah Carter, not only co-owns my company, but she personally invested in and saved your fiancé's first startup when no one else would. That's right. Tyler Hudson wouldn't be standing here today if not for Hannah's kindness and belief in his vision." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Heads spun toward Tyler Hudson, the groom who had stood in stunned silence near the edge of the ballroom, watching the entire scene unfold. Vanessa spun around as if remembering he even existed. "Tyler," she croaked. "I didn't know. I didn't think it was like that." But Tyler's face was carved in stone. Slowly he stepped forward. His voice, when it came, was hoarse but steady. "You used the woman who gave me a future, Vanessa. You humiliated her. Lied to me. Used me to hurt her." Vanessa's hands trembled. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Tyler shook his head. "I can't marry someone who thinks that kind of cruelty is entertainment, who mocks dignity and decency." He turned toward the stunned crowd, every eye on him. "I'm calling this wedding off." Vanessa's knees buckled, and she had to steady herself against the podium. The ballroom erupted, not in applause, not in shock, but in stunned, guilty silence. Jessica, seeing the unraveling spiral out of control, tried to slip away quietly. But Julian turned to his assistant, Emily, and nodded. "Start identifying every guest who participated in Hannah's public humiliation. I want names, posts, videos. Every one of them. Their sponsors, their brands, they'll all hear about this." Emily nodded and began issuing quiet orders into a headset. Ashley stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Julian, please. I didn't mean to, it was just for social media." Julian looked her square in the eyes. "Then you'll learn that the internet remembers everything. And so do I." Security had already begun gathering names and social media posts. Guests, now realizing the storm had only just begun, desperately deleted Instagram photos and tried to scrub their TikToks. But the damage was done. And then Hannah, quiet, wounded but never defeated, took a single step forward. Her voice was soft but it carried. "To everyone in this room," she began, "I came here tonight with an open heart. I thought maybe someone I once knew had grown into someone better. I was wrong." She looked at Vanessa, whose mascara-streaked tears were now running freely. "But this isn't just about me. This is about every person who has ever walked into a room and been judged for how they looked, not who they are. Who's been dismissed because they didn't wear the right brand, or sit at the right table, or come from the right family. She paused. Let it settle. I wore linen tonight because I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came here to celebrate, to show grace. And I was met with hatred. Her gaze hardened. But I'm still standing. And I will keep standing. The entire room, once hostile, mocking, now watched her with stunned reverence. Several guests even looked away, ashamed. Julian stepped beside her again, his arm wrapping around her back. And just then Emily returned, whispering something into Julian's ear. He nodded once, then looked back at the ballroom. Security footage has been retrieved. Posts have been archived. And action will be taken. Every one of you who joined in this circus will face the consequences. He turned to Marcus and Ryan, the guards. Escort Vanessa and her friends out. They're no longer welcome here. Marcus stepped forward, hesitant but firm. Miss Crawford, please come with us. Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She knew there was no use. Jessica followed, stunned. Brittany burst into tears. Ashley begged, but the guards didn't stop. As the four were led away, Hannah stood silent, her face unreadable. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Just unshakably dignified. The ballroom doors closed softly behind the four disgraced women, their hurried footsteps swallowed by the thick silence that followed. No one dared speak. The atmosphere had shifted, utterly, irreversibly. The same space that moments ago echoed with laughter at Hannah's expense now reverberated with something far heavier, collective guilt. Hannah stood quietly beside Julian, the deep red stain still vivid on her linen dress. Her hands were clasped in front of her, eyes calm but distant. Though the perpetrators had been removed, the sting of what had transpired still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Julian leaned down and spoke softly to her. Would you like to leave? I'll have the jet ready in minutes. But Hannah shook her head gently. No, she said. Not like this. Julian raised an eyebrow. I don't want them to remember me as the woman they forced out, she explained. I want them to remember the truth. And I want them to see who I really am, not who they tried to paint me as. A soft, proud smile tugged at the corner of Julian's lips. Then let's show them. He nodded to Emily. Within seconds, Emily approached with purposeful grace and whispered discreetly, Mrs. Carter, we've prepared a private suite just off the west corridor. There's a wardrobe ready, whatever you need. Hannah turned to Julian, her voice soft. Will you come with me? Always, he said, offering his arm. As the two disappeared through a side door, the ballroom began to stir. No one dared touch a flute of champagne. Conversations were murmured, fragmented. Regret sat on every shoulder like a ghost. And then 10 minutes later, the doors opened again. Gasps swept the room, not whispers, not mockery. Just reverent shock. Hannah re-entered, not in defiance but in transcendence. Gone was the wine-stained linen. In its place was a flowing, floor-length gown of ivory silk, minimalist, elegant, undeniably regal. The dress hugged her waist gently and shimmered softly under the chandelier light. Her hair had been let down in long waves, falling over her shoulders like liquid onyx. Her expression was composed but strong. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just radiantly herself. The crowd parted as she walked. No one dared look away. Julian, dressed in his tailored suit and quiet power, walked beside her. One hand on her lower back. The other in his pocket. His posture wasn't boastful, it was protective, proud, certain. And slowly, almost awkwardly at first, guests began to applaud. The applause grew louder, deeper, echoing through the vaulted ceilings. Not the superficial clapping reserved for grand entrances or expensive outfits. This was something different. Respect. Recognition. Redemption. Tyler Hudson stepped forward as the applause softened. His tuxedo was slightly rumpled from emotion, and his expression carried a mix of remorse and resolve. He bowed his head slightly, then looked up into Hannah's eyes. Hannah, he said quietly, I can't begin to say how sorry I am. I didn't know what Vanessa was planning. But I let it happen. I let her turn something that should have been beautiful into a weapon against someone who never deserved it. He paused. You were the one who believed in me. Before the world cared. You gave me the first check that let me start my company. You treated me like a person when everyone else treated me like a risk. And tonight, I stood by while they treated you like less than nothing. Julian started to step in, but Hannah held up her hand gently. She stepped forward, looking Tyler in the eye. I don't blame you, she said softly. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in the people we think we love that we don't see the damage they do, until it's too late. Tyler nodded, swallowing hard. You have every right to hate me. But I don't, she said. Because tonight you did something most people in your position wouldn't. You stood up. You spoke truth. That takes courage. Tyler's eyes filled with gratitude. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the trust you gave me. As Tyler stepped back, Hannah turned to the remaining guests. And for a moment, the room held its breath. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice was steady, strong, and reached every corner of the room. I hope tonight teaches all of us something, she said. That no one should be measured by what they wear, or where they came from, or how quietly they walk into a room. She paused. My name is Hannah Carter. Yes, I'm wealthy. Yes, I'm a businesswoman. But none of that defines me. I define me by how I treat others, by how I carry myself, and by whether or not I rise when I've been pushed down. Julian stepped forward again, placing a hand on her shoulder as she continued. And if you ever find yourself in a room where people are being mocked for being different, don't laugh with them. Don't watch. Say something. Even if your voice shakes. Because silence is the echo of cruelty. The room fell utterly still again. Several guests lowered their heads. A few wiped their eyes. No one doubted anymore who the most powerful person in the room truly was. Just then, the string quartet, unsure of what to do, began to softly play again. A slow, soulful rendition of A Change Is Gonna Come. Julian looked down at his wife. May I have this dance? He asked gently. She smiled. I thought you'd never ask. And as they stepped onto the floor, the crowd moved aside, forming a wide circle around them. In their elegant embrace, surrounded by people who had once mocked her, Hannah moved with grace, dignity, and peace. She had not only reclaimed the room, she had transformed it. The next morning, Miami was buzzing, but not because of its sun-drenched beaches or celebrity sightings. It was because the story had gone viral. Not just local gossip. Not just influencer tea. No, this was everywhere. On every screen. Every platform. Every feed. Hashtag Hannah Carter, hashtag Justice at the Wedding, hashtag Silk Over Shame. These hashtags surged to the top of trending lists across social media. Clips of Vanessa's downfall, Ashley's live stream gone wrong, Britney's desperate sobs, and Jessica's red wine accident were now stitched into thousands of reaction videos. But what stunned the world wasn't the cruelty, it was Hannah. Her poise. Her grace. Her silence when the world was screaming at her, and her power when she finally spoke. TikTokers called it the classiest revenge in history. Journalists called it the moral earthquake of high society. News anchors debated the ethics of wealth, race, and respect on live TV. And brands? Sponsors? They responded too. Ashley lost her beauty endorsement contracts within 12 hours. Jessica's TV show was pulled from the network schedule before lunch. Britney's cosmetics brand issued a public apology, but the comment section was brutal. Consumers demanded accountability. Shareholders bailed. And Vanessa? She vanished. Her wedding, which was supposed to launch her into a new echelon of influencer royalty, had instead become the cautionary tale of the decade. Her name, once associated with glamour and digital dominance, was now synonymous with elitist cruelty. Meanwhile, Hannah stayed quiet. She didn't post. Didn't do interviews. Didn't comment. She didn't have to. The world was already talking, and for once it was talking right. But behind the scenes, Hannah wasn't gloating. She wasn't savoring revenge. She was rebuilding. With Julian at her side, she convened an emergency board meeting at Carter Enterprises, not for business but for purpose. We've always given quietly, she told the directors. But maybe it's time we're loud about the right things. She announced the launch of a $50 million initiative, the Carter Grace Project, aimed at elevating underrepresented voices in fashion, tech, and creative arts. The focus? People judged not by their talent, but by their zip code, their background, or the label on their shirt. The program would fund scholarships, mentorships, and creative showcases nationwide. When reporters tried to ask about Vanessa, Hannah answered with this. This story isn't about me. It's about how we treat each other when we think no one's watching. And how fast that can change when the truth comes to light. Days passed. Then weeks. And slowly the noise began to quiet. But the change? It stayed. In New York, a designer tweeted about a model she'd nearly turned away for showing up in thrift store heels, until she remembered Hannah's story. In LA, a major gala revised its dress code, urging guests to wear whatever made them feel most themselves. And in a small high school in Atlanta, A guidance counselor played Hannah's speech to a group of seniors during an assembly. She called it, the realest talk on dignity they'd ever hear. Back in Miami at the now infamous Azure Hotel, life went on. The ballroom was repolished. The chandeliers cleaned. The linens replaced. But something had changed. Staff still whispered about that night. Tourists asked to see the room where Hannah stood. Event planners said the energy in the space just felt different. And in the penthouse suite where Vanessa had once finalized wedding plans, the hotel had installed a new painting, one that hadn't been there before. It was a commissioned portrait of a black woman in a flowing ivory gown, chin lifted, eyes fierce, standing in the middle of a crowd that once tried to break her. A small brass plate at the bottom read, "She rose anyway." In a rare public appearance 1 month later, Julian Carter stood at a philanthropic summit in Chicago. He was asked to speak about leadership, wealth, and reputation. He paused before answering, then said only this: "My greatest fortune isn't measured in shares or assets. It's measured in the strength of a woman who reminds me every day that dignity can't be bought, and shouldn't have to be defended." The room stood in applause before he even finished. 6 months had passed since the wedding, the one that never happened. To most of the world, the scandal had faded into a cautionary footnote. Other viral stories had come and gone, outrage had shifted to new targets, and social media had moved on. But for Hannah Carter, the echoes of that night weren't just background noise, they had become the foundation of a quiet, powerful movement. The Carter Grace Project had already opened 3 creative incubators across the country, in Baltimore, Detroit, and New Orleans. Dozens of artists, designers, musicians, and young entrepreneurs walked into those spaces wearing clothes that once made them feel small, and left feeling 10 feet tall. And still, Hannah remained understated. She declined interviews, turned down magazine covers, and rarely appeared on camera. When reporters pressed for a quote, she offered a single line: "This isn't about my voice, it's about giving others the mic." But not everyone had let go of the past. One warm afternoon in New York, as Hannah stepped out of a community gallery supported by the Grace Project, her assistant approached her with hesitation in her eyes. "There's someone here asking to see you," she said. "She says she just wants 2 minutes. Her name is Vanessa." Hannah stilled. For a moment she considered turning away, saying no, walking into her car and never thinking about that name again. But something in her heart, some strange blend of grace and gravity, urged her forward. "Where is she?" Hannah asked softly. "She's just down the block," her assistant said. "She wouldn't come closer without permission." Hannah nodded. "I'll go to her." Vanessa Crawford stood beside a modest cafe, nothing like the 5-star rooftop lounges she used to flaunt. She wore jeans, a simple black jacket, and sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her face. When she saw Hannah, she took a hesitant step forward, but didn't speak. Hannah stopped a few feet away. "Come, to." The silence stretched. Then Vanessa lowered her sunglasses, revealing tear-streaked eyes. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," she began, her voice hoarse. "I've rehearsed 100 apologies and deleted 1,000 messages I was too ashamed to send." Hannah said nothing, just waited. "I lost everything," Vanessa continued. "My career, my brand deals, my savings. Even Tyler sued me for defamation and emotional distress. I thought I deserved it. I still do." She looked up. "But I came here because there's something I need to say, not for forgiveness. Just the truth." She took a deep breath. "I hated you in high school because you were good. Not loud. Not flashy. Just good. And no matter how many people liked me, I knew deep down they respected you. That made me feel small." Pause. "And when I saw your name on the guest list for my wedding, something in me cracked. I thought if I could reduce you in front of everyone, I could feel powerful again. I thought hurting you would make me whole." She looked away, shame radiating off her in waves. "But all it did was show the world who I really was. And I can't undo that. But I can live differently now." She met Hannah's eyes again. "You were right that night. About silence. About dignity. About everything. I wanted you to know I finally understand." The silence that followed was not cold. It was heavy, contemplative, full of something unspoken and deeply human. Then Hannah took a step forward. Her voice was gentle. "Do you want a seat?" Vanessa blinked. "What?" "Inside. At the cafe. You said you only needed 2 minutes. You've earned 5. Vanessa stared, stunned, until the edge of a smile flickered through her disbelief. Hannah turned and opened the door. And together they stepped into the cafe, not as enemies, not as friends, but as women who had finally faced the mirror and chosen something better. That night, Julian asked her how it went. "She's different," Hannah said, curling beside him on the couch. "Different as in changed?" he asked. "Different as in a learning." Julian smiled. "You always had a way of making people want to be better." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not everyone." "No," he said softly. "Just the ones who matter. Sometimes, life gives us a platform we never asked for, a stage built from cruelty, injustice, or humiliation. But what we do on that stage defines everything that comes next." Hannah Carter didn't shout. She didn't fight fire with fire. She stood tall. She let truth speak louder than gossip. And she let grace be louder than revenge. Let this story remind us, power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks into the room in a linen dress, and still wins. If Hannah's journey stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. What we wear, how we look, or where we come from should never define our worth. Let's rise above prejudice and meet each other with dignity, every single time. Subscribe to True Echo for more stories that shake the room. Drop a comment. Have you ever felt judged for being yourself? And share this video, because kindness is contagious when we make it echo.